This is the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is never accepted. Statisticians will get really mad if you say, I accept the null hypothesis. Grrr, we're mad. Rejecting the null hypothesis is just fine for some reason. Then they're happy. But accepting is bad. Very bad. They want you to twist yourself into knots saying, I fail to reject the null hypothesis. I fail to reject the null hypothesis, you say. And they say, we love double negatives. Do these pedants have a point? Let's try to understand the basic ideas of hypothesis testing and decide for ourselves. So a null hypothesis is a default assumption. It's the thing we want to disprove, whereas the alternative hypothesis is the thing we want to potentially prove. For example, our null hypothesis might be that a drug does not work, and the alternative hypothesis that we want to prove is that the drug does work. What is the role of the null hypothesis? Well, because we can describe the null hypothesis in detail, we can know what typical outcomes look like, and then see when something weird happens. So, for example, the drug does not work. This is a simple thing to understand. There's basically only one way to be a useless drug. It's that you don't work, just like a placebo. The alternative hypothesis that the drug does work is much harder to understand. A drug can work a little bit, a lot, or anywhere in between. The null hypothesis helps us define a null distribution, and this shows us what types of data are likely or unlikely to occur if the null hypothesis is true. So if the drug doesn't work, most likely we'll see no improvement. But sometimes we'll see a small improvement, or sometimes we'll see the drug do a little worse than the placebo. However, we won't often see big improvements or big harms. However, if we see really weird results like this, we might decide to reject the null hypothesis. Technically, it's still possible that the drug is ineffective, but when we see that a lot of people get better, it makes us think that the drug works. So when we say, I reject the null hypothesis that the drug is ineffective, what we mean is that we found evidence that the drug works. But of course, we still always have uncertainty because data is random, and we could have just observed a weird result just by chance, even though the drug doesn't really work. However, statisticians are still okay with using the very strong language of rejecting the null hypothesis in this case. Now, if we assume the drug doesn't work and we see a normal result consistent with an ineffective drug, we definitely don't want to reject the null hypothesis. And the opposite of rejecting is accepting. Oh, here they are again. No, it's failing to reject. The statisticians are worried that if you say accept, you will think that we are 100% sure that the drug doesn't work. But maybe the drug just works a little bit and we didn't detect it. We are never going to prove the null hypothesis is true, which is why people don't like it when you say accept. But you're also never going to prove the null hypothesis is false, but we're still allowed to reject it. It seems unfair. So the statisticians are worried that if you say accept, you will think that we are 100% sure the drug does not work at all. And we aren't 100% sure the drug has exactly zero effect, but we didn't accomplish the goal we wanted, proving the drug works. But more importantly than the words we use, how do we act? We won't release the drug. We are acting as if the null is true, as if the drug doesn't work at all. So let's look at the dictionary for some definitions of the word accept. And maybe the statisticians have a point that we don't recognize the null hypothesis as 100% correct, as in this definition of accept. But what about these definitions? We usually tolerate the null hypothesis, or at least act as if it is true. We endure it without protest. So here are some common null hypotheses, and I may not know these are 100% true, but I'll still act as if they are true if I fail to reject the null hypothesis. The drug doesn't work. When I don't find evidence the drug works, I'm not going to use the drug, so it might as well not work. The two groups are the same. If I didn't find evidence that the groups are different, I'm not going to act like they're different. I'm going to act like they're basically the same. And if there is no relationship between X and Y, and I didn't prove that there is a relationship between X and Y, I'm going to go about my life continuing as if there is no relationship between X and Y, even if I didn't 100% accept that these are perfectly true. So if we fail to reject the null hypothesis, we often continue to act as if we believe the null hypothesis. Maybe not strongly, but more than the alternative. Do we really have to believe anything strongly? We can operate in a state of open-mindedness. I accept everything and everyone. If you're taking a statistics class, maybe you should take the easy path and not upset your teacher and say that you fail to reject the null hypothesis. That will make them happy. But maybe you can be a rebel for the radical cause of acceptance. I accept the null hypothesis. And maybe things can change. We accept you, null hypothesis. Well, maybe not 100%. I don't care what words you use. What matters is your understanding of the truth and the actions you take. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to learn more statistics.